I'm Carrie Randabolio, Provincial Coordinator Knowledge Mobilization here at the Alzheimer Society of B.C. I'm joined today by Dr. Sarah Wu, our Strategic Lead Research, and also with us is our co-op student Olivia, who will be keeping a close eye on the chat. So please pop any questions you have in the chat box, and we'll be keeping track for the discussion to follow. In August, we shared a bite-sized summary of what we heard about sleep at the Alzheimer's Association International Conference, and we've linked that webinar in our helpful resources document as well as the time codes. But we only had 8 minutes for that little segment. So we're so excited to be joined by Dr. Elizabeth Keys today to paint a more detailed picture of the relationship between sleep, brain health, and well-being. Elizabeth is a registered nurse and assistant professor in the School of Nursing, Faculty of Health and Social Development at the University of British Columbia Okanagan campus, and is the lead investigator for the Canadian Institutes for Health Research funded SLUMBER Research Lab at UBC Okanagan. Dr. Keys is co-principal investigator with the Canadian Sleep Research Consortium, where she leads the early childhood hub of the Sleep Across the Lifespan team and is co-lead for the Sleep Health Equity Engagement Project, SHEEP. You might have seen some recruitment posters for that study earlier in the summer, I believe. With a clinical background in child, school, community, and public health nursing, Dr. Key's research is grounded in the value that genuine community and collaborator engagement is essential to creating meaningful changes. So before I turn the floor over to Dr. Keys, I'd like to acknowledge that our team is speaking to you today from our provincial office located in what we now call Vancouver. This place is the unceded and ancestral territory of the Hunkaminam and Squamish-speaking peoples, so the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations, and has been stewarded by them since time immemorial. We encourage you to share with us in the chat the traditional territories from which you're joining us this afternoon. And as we share where we're coming together from, I'll stop sharing my screen and invite Elizabeth to take it from here.
Hello, everyone. It's really a pleasure to join you and talk a little bit about sleep and sleep health. These are some of my favorite topics, and a lot of the research that I do is in this area. Oh, there we go. So I just like to share where I'm coming from today, which is in Kelowna, and I work for UBC Okanagan. The campus is situated on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Silk Okanagan Nation. In terms of sleep health too, I just like to also acknowledge a lot of the research that has been done is really informed by a colonized kind of perspective, westernized ways of knowing. And so there is a lot more to learn from broader perspectives, and I just like to acknowledge that that's still an area that we need to do better in sleep health research, but we're trying to. So with that, I'm just going to kind of share a little bit over what I'm hoping to cover and talk with you about today. And really the goal, I think, is to get you thinking about sleep and how it can be used as a tool for your health and well-being. So I'm just going to do a little bit more of an introduction of myself, why sleep is important, and then go over a little bit of what we mean when we talk about sleep health and in the context of adults. A lot of my research actually is more in early childhood, but people grow up and their sleep kind of changes throughout the lifespan, and so we're learning more and more about different connections, and there's also many principles that are consistent across the lifespan, especially in terms of sleep health, which is what I'm primarily talking about today. We'll talk a little bit about what influences sleep health, and then I've pulled together a few research snapshots, kind of building on some of the content from that 8 minutes in that webinar last time. And so I hope to kind of just give you a couple more examples and ideas about what's going on in terms of research. So I always just like to do a little bit of an introduction because why should you listen to me? I so I was born and raised in what's now known Calgary. I did most of my schooling there at the University of Calgary with an undergraduate in science and nursing, and then went on to do my PhD um, after working in the community at the Alberta Health Services for a little bit. I've also done some training at Dalhousie University, so completely on the other side of the country in the Department of Psychology and Neuroscience to learn a little bit more about sleep. And then I came back here and started my position at UBC Okanagan Slumber Lab in 2021. So not so new anymore. And just a few other things that I love about living and working in this beautiful area. So two little, well, they're not so little anymore. They're boys and a couple of dogs. And I really love the Okanagan sunflower flower, which is a great springtime sign, which we are in the gray duvet right now. So it's just a little bit about my history and training and just kind of how I got into the research world. So I'd like to just talk a moment about what is sleep because sometimes we take it for granted. So sleep is really conceptualized as a behavioral state. So it's opposite of being awake, essentially. And we do know that in terms of what it is and what happens when we do it, we cycle through different stages of sleep. So you may have heard of REM sleep or non-REM sleep. There's different stages in terms of how deep you are into the sleep. And so stages 1, 2, 3, and 4. And when we kind of look at all those different stages, that's sometimes called your sleep architecture or all the different kind of subtypes of sleep. And so that's essentially what sleep is the opposite of being awake. And then a big question is, well, why? Why do we need sleep? Many things rest. And here's an example, koalas who probably rest the most or get the award of resting the most. I think 23 hours of their 24-hour days are spent in sleep. And so we know it's important. We know we do it. We know kind of how we do it, but we don't know exactly why. And there's lots of theories about why we sleep. Some of them are rooted in kind of biological reasons and mechanisms. So it's a way of kind of doing cellular repair, a chance for different hormones to come out and play, so to speak, with our bodies. It strengthens your immune system. It has sometimes thinking about mental housekeeping in terms of kind of the biological theories. There's some social theories as well in terms of humans kind of living and working together and what safety and you don't want to be walking around in the middle of the night if it's not a safe situation, especially a long time ago. And so, it's something that maybe we developed socially. And then also there's cultural kind of theories about how our different cultures kind of experience sleep. And we do know that there's quite a lot of different accepted ways of what's good sleep around the world. And so there might not necessarily be one best way, but it is important that the sleep that you're getting is kind of a fit with your kind of socio-cultural landscape. That's some recent research came out of UBC actually a few months ago that talked about, even if people slept less, as long as that was a match with what their cultural norm was, they actually did okay. So I'm going to then talk now a little bit about sleep health for adults. So that's kind of sleep. Why? There's probably lots of reasons why. And then now I'm going to talk a little bit more about the sleep health aspect, because just like mental health, there's sleep disorders, but then there's also kind of optimal ways of sleeping that can support your health and be healthier in terms of some practices and components. And so when we think of sleep health, it's usually more than just how much you're sleeping. So sleep duration is considered kind of an important part of sleep health, so you need to be getting enough sleep. But then there's a bunch of other things that you can think about when you're thinking about sleep in terms of um, how supporting your sleep for your health. And so there's sleep timing. So when you're sleeping, there's something called sleep efficiency. Then there's also the kind of opposite point of how alert you are during the daytime, because if you're having good sleep health, you're usually able to stay awake during the day. Then there's kind of an aspect of how satisfied or your sleep quality. And then there's an aspect of how regular it is. And so I'm just going to go through these concepts a little bit because I think they're really key in thinking about our sleep health and building some ideas about, different things that you may be thinking about in terms of using sleep as a tool for your health. So sleep duration. So I know we don't have, oh, you can pop it in the chat here if you have a moment about what do you think the recommended amount of sleep adults should get in Canada, A, B, or C? And what you think about how many Canadian adults get the recommended amount of sleep. Just take a moment and think about your answer. You can even call a friend if you need. So we have some answers trickling in. So um, the first one is a little bit of a trick question. So it depends exactly on your age. So for adults aged 18 to 64, the recommended amount of sleep is 7 to 9 hours. And then for adults 65 and over, usually the sweet spot is around 7 to 8 hours. And those are pulled from something that's called the Canadian 24-hour movement guidelines for adults. They were only released in 2020, and so they kind of have brought together a lot of evidence about kind of thinking what's the ideal amount of sleep for Canadians. When we think about how many Canadian adults actually get the recommended amount of sleep, it's really quite low. So only about 35% of adults get enough sleep. And the median duration, so most adults get about 6.8 hours. So that's, definitely under what would be recommended. So that's one thing you can think about when you're thinking about your sleep is how long is your sleep? In terms of timing, timing is an interesting thing to think about because as you mature, your biology changes a little bit. The circadian rhythm can shift a bit. So we see kind of two stages of life when this happens. The first is when you're going through puberty and you have a kind of delayed release of a hormone called melatonin, which really helps your inner body clock and maintain that kind of daily body rhythm. And then as you age and you approach around 60 years of age, you have another little bit of a shift to maybe being a little bit earlier. The other things that control your sleep timing or when you're sleeping is how long you've been awake. So that's something that's called sleep pressure. So you can think of it as a balloon rising up and up and up and building sleep pressure. And then when you have enough sleep pressure, that's when you can fall asleep. So that sleep pressure combined with circadian rhythm are really two big drivers for when people can sleep. Because the interesting thing about sleep timing is there's very high chance that if I said I'll give anyone $1 million to fall asleep right now, that not very many people could do that just on cue. So you can't just control with your mind when exactly like to fall asleep right now. They're kind of these underlying processes. And then the other thing that you can think about is the social and cultural kind of societal expectations might also affect sleep timing. So sometimes these are work or school responsibilities, sometimes these are caregiving responsibilities, and so they can affect when you're sleeping. It is typically optimal for your sleep health if you can have your sleep timing kind of uh, mirror or match kind of your inner body clock and rhythm, which is set by lots of external cues, but also internal cues. So the sun rises, people are typically well suited to wake up, and when the sun sets, people and it's dark outside, people are more easily able to fall asleep. If you have things that are making you be awake or sleep in kind of opposite timings, that can negatively impact your sleep health. The third thing I want to mention about sleep health is this concept about sleep efficiency. So you can actually be spending quite a long time in bed trying to sleep. But if you have lots of wake ups and lots of time in that period where you're actually not sleeping, you're going to have low sleep efficiency. So sleep efficiency is the amount of time you spend actually sleeping compared to the amount of time you are trying to sleep. And this is really linked quite a bit to your sleep satisfaction. And it's really an interesting concept to think about because you can be in bed less time but be more satisfied with your sleep because you have a higher sleep efficiency, meaning you're actually sleeping when you want to. And so this is a little bit of a hard concept, like lots of things can affect people's ability to fall and stay asleep. And so you may have heard about things like sleep associations. So we were talking right before the webinar about someone has a fan in their office, and lots of people will use fans to fall asleep to because they like the noise and the temperature. And so you learn to fall asleep to a certain condition like a fan, and that's called a sleep association. Some of these sleep associations are pretty helpful in terms of, if you can learn to fall asleep in a dark, cool room, or you have a sleep association with your bed, that's really helpful in improving your sleep efficiency. But if you spend a lot of time worrying about not falling asleep in bed, you might create an association where your bed is no longer associated with sleep, but associated with worry. And that's going to be really hard and negatively impact your sleep health. There's also other things like social responsibilities I mentioned before about that may affect your ability to fall and stay asleep. And then also there's home and neighborhood conditions. So if there's really quite a lot of light or noise in your neighborhood, you might have more difficulty falling and staying asleep because things might be waking you up. I have an example to illustrate this. So I mentioned that if you have high sleep efficiency, people are usually quite happy. And then if you don't, you can be a little bit sad about your sleep health. And that low sleep efficiency can sometimes lead to an actual sleep disorder called insomnia. And so we can just kind of paint the picture a little bit with two scenarios. So Billy goes to bed, turns off the lights at 11, falls right asleep at 11:15, gets up to, go to the washroom maybe once at night, and is awake at 6. So not very much time, like a later bedtime, earlier rise time, compared to Jamie, who tries to go to bed early at 9:30, but only falls asleep at 10:30 and kind of is awake in the middle of the night, just difficulty falling back asleep. And so then when they finally do fall back asleep, they wake up at 8 a.m. So you might think that Jamie might have better sleep because they're in bed from 9:30 to 8. So there's lots of sleep opportunity. But when you kind of crunch the numbers, and I don't want anyone to worry about doing math right now, but if you don't want to take my word for it, you can see it on the screen. When we crunch the numbers, Bailey, you can see has like 95% sleep efficiency, whereas Jamie has 85. So that's a little bit of something to think about, because if you're spending a lot of time in bed and not sleeping well, you're not losing anything by kind of not being in bed if you're not sleeping in bed. The fourth kind of component of sleep health is kind of daytime alertness and napping. So good sleep health typically results in being alert during the day and being able to function so you can do whatever you need to do. Now in Canada, we typically consider falling asleep during the day, especially unplanned naps, to not really be typical if you're getting enough good quality sleep at night. Other countries kind of have different norms and things what they would consider typical. But usually what we would say is if you're falling asleep unintentionally or finding you're needing to nap after 3 or 4 p.m., that's usually not helpful for then falling asleep at night. And one of the reasons is that it deflates your sleep pressure balloon. So as you're building up your sleep pressure and staying awake during the day, if you have a nap, it kind of takes the edge off, and then you're not able to fall asleep, say, at your bedtime. So then you stay up later, and it all feeds into one another. Now there is a lot of research on, can we use naps in a good way? So some naps can be good. And so, for example, I pulled some research for this presentation about napping in older adults. And when compared to either no naps or really long naps, people who had short naps, so less than 30 minutes, and people who had moderate naps, somewhere between 30 to 90 minutes, actually can really benefit cognitive health in older adults. So that's something that, we need to kind of think about. If you're unintentionally falling asleep, that's maybe a sign that your sleep is, you might want to take a more in-depth look at it. There might be other things going on, but if you're wanting to nap, that can, on purpose, that can be a good thing, especially in terms of cognitive health and for older adults. I think the last kind of component of sleep health that I wanted to talk about, and I think this is actually going to become really important in terms of cognitive functioning and dementia, and it's something that's going to be getting more and more looked into it by the look of the literature, is that while we expect some night to night variability, so we know, you might not have every night be the same, exact same. Some nights you might sleep really well, some nights you might not sleep as great. We expect some normal variation. Trying to keep regular bedtimes and wake times can be really important for sleep health. So, consistent bedtime where you're falling asleep reliably in 30 minutes or less, and then also consistent wake times are important. If they're not, and we see this oftentimes, we can go back to the earlier end of the sleep, or sorry, lifespan, especially with adolescents, we see a lot of these variations in sleep timing, and that can lead to what's called social jet lag. So everybody's getting up really early in the morning on the weekdays to go to school and work. And then when they get to the weekend, they're like, oh, thank goodness, it's Friday, I can sleep in. And essentially, if you're changing your sleep times, 2-3 hours from weekday to weekend, it's almost like you're taking a plane across the country to a 2 or 3 hour time zone shift, and then you're for only 2 days, and then you're trying to come back. So you end up with this social jet lag, where it's negatively impacting your sleep health, and then that will negatively impact your ability to fall back asleep. Because if you're sleeping in on, let's say, for example, Sunday morning till 10, 11, but you're normally needing to get up at 7 a.m., you're not going to have that time for that sleep pressure to build up on Sunday, and then you're going to have trouble falling asleep Sunday night, and then you're going to start Monday off really tired. Now, this was really interesting, and I think something that is going to get more and more be examined more and more, because there was just recently, actually, in 2024, a report came out of McGill University that talked about increased variability in some sleep patterns, and specifically your timing. So how much variability between day to day, and duration, so the length. So short nights one night, or short sleep times one night, long sleep times the next night. And so that increased variability has recently been linked to the presence of preclinical biomarkers that are associated with Alzheimer's disease. And so this is something that I think there's a lot of research, a really interesting research area. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in the research updates. Oh, that wasn't the last one, surprise. The last one is satisfaction and quality. So this is really, we can measure all the other things, but satisfaction and quality is really up to the individual. So you get to decide. And so oftentimes there's lots of different ways you can be asked about this. One way is, how satisfied or dissatisfied are you with your current sleep pattern? So pretty straightforward. So you can go very satisfied to very dissatisfied. And we actually have some studies that ask this in Canada. So if you want to put in your guess about how many people are satisfied with their sleep, I'll give you a moment to make a guess. So there we go. So about 73% of Canadians aged 45 to 85 years are actually very satisfied or satisfied with their sleep health, which is surprising when we consider that the sleep duration is, less than what is recommended. And it's just people who tend to be most satisfied with their sleep health are males, older adults, people with more than $20,000 household income, and people who are married or in common law relationships. So those are just some kind of characteristics that are associated with sleep satisfaction in Canada. All right, so I've seen a couple of questions pop up about like, what can you do for sleep health? And so I just wanted to then move into talking about what influences sleep health. So sometimes there are things that we can control, and sometimes there are things that we can't. So I call them sleep influencers. So I don't know if anyone is familiar with social media influencers, but I have a 14-year-old, so I am. And one of the big ones is age and biology. And so I think sometimes just by understanding what influences there can be on your sleep health, you're able to understand if that's something that you can change or not. And I think by understanding a little bit more about the sleep health concept, that opens up the conversation for people to have with their primary care provider or another healthcare provider, because until recently, I think we have taken sleep for granted. So these are some of the things that I think that if you're hearing, me talk about, and you're thinking, oh, that's interesting, I'm pretty dissatisfied with my sleep, that's a good indicator that maybe that's a conversation that you might want to go to and talk with your healthcare team about. But I'm just going to set the stage a little bit more with what the individual factors, so factors that are unique to one person first, and then I'll talk a little bit more about other types of sleep influencers. So age and biology, definitely a sleep influencer. I mentioned how the timing might change. We saw some examples how adults over 65 might need a little bit less sleep than adults, under 65. And But there's a few other considerations to think about when you're thinking about age and biology. And so one really important thing that's getting a lot more research into it is after menopause, females are more likely to have trouble falling asleep and also screen positively for what's called obstructive sleep apnea, which is a sleep-related breathing disorder, which I'll also talk about in a moment. So this is something I think that's really helpful for older people who are female to know about, because if you're also if that fits who you are and you're having trouble falling asleep, that's something that maybe you might want to follow up on. The other things that we think about is the immediate environment. And so oftentimes you may have heard of the term sleep hygiene, which is, you know, what are your behaviors around sleep in terms of setting up those conditions to make you fall asleep when you want to fall asleep, setting a relaxing kind of um, bedtime routine. That consistent sleep pattern usually really helps. But in terms of your immediate environment, if you do have control over it, it's a great thing to work on in terms of being cool, dark, and quiet. So if you're in a noisy environment, earplugs can be something that can be helpful. There's other things too that can affect your immediate environment. So sharing a bed with another person or even an animal. Generally, sleep quality actually perceptions can be better. So you might feel like you're sleeping better, but when we measure the sleep objectively, you're probably not sleeping quite as much or as efficiently as you would be if you were not. Another example that I thought was really important to highlight because it goes into that adage of don't go to bed mad is there's quite a bit of research talking about, in couples, if you have higher conflict management skills, and that will reduce stress and improve both people's sleep. So things like yeah, not going to bed mad is actually has a little bit of legs in the research. Sleep, in terms of other health conditions, so there's quite a lot of thought in terms of both physical health and mental health is a little bit back and forth between sleep. Um, so sometimes your physical health may impact your sleep, and other times your sleep may impact your physical health, and the same with mental health as well. And it's probably not either or, it's probably all at once and really messy and complicated. But if you can think about what you can control and try to do your best with your sleep health, that might help improve other aspects of health. So this is an example that I thought might be interesting for folks. So if you have pain is often cited as something that will influence sleep. Um, and so people with chronic back pain can be twice as likely to have a sleep disorder, which is, yeah, not great news, but it might be a little validating if you're someone that experiences pain and sleep disorder, to know that can happen. And the good news is there's actually lots of things that you can do to improve your sleep if you have a sleep disorder. Mental health is another thing. Sometimes sleep changes come before mental health changes, and sometimes sleep changes come after mental health changes. So this example here that I just wanted to share was, sometimes older adults with difficulty falling asleep and who are who experience daytime sleepiness or fatigue can actually be a precursor or a kind of a heightened risk to developing depression. And so this is one of the reasons why I think it's really important to be talking to lots of people about sleep health, is because if you are, again, experiencing sleep kind of disruption or difficulties, it's really important and worthwhile to talk to your primary care provider about. I put these as separate sleep influencers. So insomnia is an example of a of a sleep-wake disorder. That is definitely going to impact your sleep health, okay? And so what this means is it's usually chronic difficulty falling and or staying asleep. So you have low sleep efficiency over several months. Okay, so it's not something that's a bad night or bad week, it's consistently happening. And it's kind of rooted in the idea of your body learning, um, both your mind and body actually learning to not sleep when you want it to sleep or when you have time to sleep. And insomnia can either be completely on its own or secondary to other conditions. So, for example, pain is a good example. So you might, if you're having lots of pain, you might develop insomnia from being uncomfortable and in pain in bedtime. The good news is that there is for insomnia in general, a pretty standard, well recommended treatment, which is cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. And it works on thinking about kind of both behavioral strategies. So sometimes there's temporary restriction of how much time you're in bed to recondition your body to learn to fall asleep and stay asleep in bed. And that's coupled with kind of cognitive strategies, which is thinking about, if you're having racing thoughts or unhelpful thoughts when you're trying to sleep, strategies to help with that. And there's lots of options for this. So usually, historically, it's been offered by a clinical psychologist, which is kind of expensive. But there's many more options now in terms of, self-guided, either in a book or online, or even they're developing quite a lot app-based options for this. And there's also therapist guide, therapist led, either in groups or individual. And the Canadian Sleep Research Consortium actually is compiling a list of different providers who provide cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. So this can be a great option to look into. I know also some primary care groups are starting to offer this as well. The other kind of big other sleep wake disorder that is quite common is sleep apnea. And this definitely also impacts your sleep because you have brief periods of not breathing while you're sleeping, and this leads to quite a bit of daytime sleepiness. The most common is called obstructive sleep apnea. You might have heard of that, and you'll have kind of blocked or narrowed airways during sleep, and you'll see this come up as snoring or restless sleep or even like gasping at night. And it's got a pretty good treatment option as well, which is this CPAP, if you've heard of a CPAP machine. That's usually the standard kind of treatment. There's also new oral appliances and nasal devices being developed. And then those in combination with some lifestyle modifications. So sometimes it's weight management, because if you have a lot of weight around your airways, it's going to kind of make them collapse, as well as environmental considerations and avoiding certain medications or alcohol. There's nearly one in five adults over 45 is at risk for OSA in Canada, and there's this very well established stop bang screening questionnaire. So it asks, if you do snore loudly, if you're tired and fatigued or sleepy, and if anyone's observed you kind of stop breathing or choking or gasping in sleep, and a few other things. So again, if you're thinking that your sleep is a problem, this is for you or a loved one, this is a really great thing to be asking about. And it was actually, there's a researcher at University of Toronto that has led this stop bang questionnaire, and is quite renowned. So it's another thing to be impressed with when we're talking about, lots of talks about made in Canada these days. I'm just want to talk a little bit about other influences on sleep. So you need to sometimes people don't have enough opportunity to sleep, and that's paid or due to paid or unpaid work. So especially if you're doing caregiving work, it's important to take the time, or it's important to have sleep. And so there's might be different options in terms of respite so that you can get sleep. Consistency in bedtimes and wake times is really important, kind of creating sleep promoting environments in terms of those environmental things. Being physically active and getting a good nutrition is also helpful. Positive social interactions and healthy relationships we'll talk about, and technology. Just in terms of, it can be really great. You can measure your sleep with lots of fancy devices sometimes, but sometimes, they can negatively impact, especially in terms of screen times and social media. If you're really getting drawn into that, it can disrupt your sleep. I've talked a little bit about community factors, so neighborhood characteristics, availability of health services. If you're needing screening, that can also impact your sleep health. And then social and societal values. So sometimes, busy means that you're a good person, and taking time to rest means that you're lazy, and that's, not very supportive of protecting sleep health. We know daylight saving times results in more sleep deprivation and other health issues. And then with many kind of aspects of health, we know that, the more kind of power and privilege you have in society, the better health you have. And so sleep health is really no different than that. I'm just going to go and talk a few kind of tidbits about research snapshots. So in terms of sleep and social relationships across the lifespan, we know that sleep supports emotional regulation. It helps people have more empathy, be less irritable. That is especially important in relationships where there's caregiving going on, whether or not it's, parents of children or adults providing care to people who are have disability, or a spouse who has health needs. And at the same time, we also know that if you are at risk for poor sleep quality, good social supports really helps protect that. So this is a really interesting area where, if you have some good social support, that will really buffer sleep problems. So that's a really important thing to be thinking about. In terms of sleep and Alzheimer's disease, I think probably not enough time to go into it in huge detail. But when I was kind of preparing for this presentation, I was looking across the board and trying to see what kinds of research is happening related to sleep and Alzheimer's disease. And so I think there's a lot of research that's going on in terms of characterizing how sleep is different at different stages. So, thinking about that variability in the preclinical aspect. And even using it as early detection signs. Understanding what role sleep plays in brain function, I think, will be huge in terms of then understanding how we can support brain health and brain function. A big question I think that's also happening is, does improving sleep help with either mitigate progression of disease, prevent disease, but then also not only for people who are at risk of Alzheimer's disease, or but people who are caring for those people. So once we have good answers about, does improving sleep help, and the outlook is good, the next question is, what types of sleep interventions work best for whom and for when? And so there's going to be a lot, I think, of research that's tailoring kind of different aspects of trying to improve sleep. I think that this was probably covered a little bit because the timing lines up with the webinar where you just introduced this idea. So there have been international recommendations for sleep and circadian research in aging and Alzheimer's disease. And so the researchers kind of put out there that they want to do more studies on highly relevant aspects of sleep. So that would be obstructive sleep apnea, insomnia, sleep architecture, and a few other things in especially in understudied populations, increase understanding of why sleep matters with function, test the sleep-related interventions, and evaluate the benefits of screening and diagnosing poor sleep at different stages, and then developing better tools to measure sleep in older adults. So I think this is really exciting in terms of the research that's going to be happening and the research that is building on what has been happening. I'd just like to take an opportunity to also highlight Canadian sleep research, because actually I think we do pretty good for one of the smaller countries. So we have Canadian Sleep Research Consortium has a website. I think it will be on the list of helpful resources. They're putting together a registry for different sleep research studies, so you could sign up and then get notified. And then I think Carrie mentioned too, we're still doing the SHEEP project. So the SHEEP project is the Sleep Health Equity Engagement Project. And really what we're trying to do with this project is understand what kind of sleep research is important to Canadians from many different perspectives, because typically research happens, the researchers decide what research happens. And so we really wanted to open it up to the Canadian public and get a sense of what is important to the public. All our studies, most of our studies are funded by the public. So I'm really glad that we have this opportunity to check in and hear what is important. So we have an email address if you're interested in kind of sharing what you think is important in Canadian sleep health research. I think there's lots of resources that will be covered. These is a list of them. So feel free to have a look and reach out. I think more and more is coming as the sleep health research in Canada continues to really grow. We've got a lot of momentum, and I think we're continuing to just do more and more. I'd like to just say thank you. You know, the whole team. I have a few key Slumber Lab members here and then some funders. But if you have any questions, I think the email is in the chat, and we can hopefully have a few questions now.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Keys. This was enlightening. I think sleep is underrated, and now we're learning how absolutely important it is for our health and our brain health. Um, I'm just going to take a boo at the questions that have come into the chat, and I've got one ready for you. So, the first question, what sleep hygiene basics of specific focus would be best to help my caregiving feel a little more manageable if it has a chance to grow with more and better adherence? Um, oh, I'm not sure about that, but basically, yeah, like what would you recommend for a caregiver, a person of someone living with dementia?
Yeah, so my initial thought was like, I think probably the consistent bedtimes and wake times is really quite powerful, but you may not have control over that as a caregiver because there's lots of unexpected things that happen. So my next thought is actually not related to sleep hygiene, but ties in that social support aspect of it, and to really kind of ask for help and leverage kind of whatever social supports that you have so that you can strengthen those, and that can sometimes offer a little bit of respite so you can get a break, or get, you know, I think it's hard to know because there's lots of different situations. I know, you know, sometimes even if you can just get a solid 5 hours stretch at night, you know, if that's the issue that's most uh, tricky to manage, sometimes respite for that. You know, naps is not a bad thing, but sometimes people have trouble falling asleep at naps. So that's where that consistent, like, keep trying and create some sleep associations that help. I think if you're having trouble falling and staying asleep, even when you have opportunity to sleep, that's a sign that maybe there's a little bit more work that could be done with a healthcare provider. And so I would encourage you to reach out to that person as part of your um, formal social support network to examine and explore what might be helpful in that aspect. This is not a straightforward answer, and I'm sorry.
These things are complex.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Another question from a participant. Um, how does the annual time change impact
Oh,
sleep?
gosh. Okay. The sleep research, we hate the annual time change. This is straightforward. So we know that when you spring forward, it's like everybody in the country all at once has just lost an hour of sleep. And we see more motor vehicle accidents. We see higher rates of admission to emergency rooms for cardiovascular like disease related events. We see poorer mental health. Like it's not good. Um, and so we like daylight. We do not like daylight savings time. We like standard time because that aligns our typical wake up times with brighter light in the morning, and that bright light exposure in the morning is better for your sleep health in general. So we know there's been research done in countries where they have cut out the time change, but they've chosen the daylight savings time change, and it's not worked out well, and they've actually switched back. So we want standard time, and there's a lot of advocacy work going on because of there's quite not it's not good for your sleep health.
Wow, my goodness, that 1 hour makes such a difference, hey?
Especially when it's everybody all at
Yeah,
once, you
yeah,
know? Yeah.
not a great combination. Okay, thank you. And I just want to let everyone to know, Dr. Keys actually has to teach a class, so we've got her for 2 more minutes. So I've got another question for you, Dr. Keys. Um, um, falling asleep while living with dementia feels easier now. Is there any idea or indication as to why this might be the case?
Then before dementia, would that be your read?
Yeah.
I do not know why that would be the case. Um, I think there could be a lot of different things happening there. So
Mhm.
I I'm sorry, I don't know.
That's okay. But we're happy that you're falling asleep
Yeah.
quickly. I mean, that's
Yes,
great
yeah.
news. Okay. And maybe time for one more question here. Um, many in my family fall asleep while watching TV, especially anytime after 7 p.m. Is sleep tendency genetically based?
Oh, there is a little bit of genetic relatedness. So sometimes we see this with circadian preferences. So the early morning larks and night owls, there's a little bit of a genetic component. There's a little bit of genetic component to being predisposed to certain sleep-wake disorders. So for example, obstructive sleep apnea. Um, if that's a little bit can be genetically linked. And then also there's kind of this, you know, very sensitive sleepers as well, or which ties into a little bit of your temperament in general. There's a genetic component to that. So yes, there is. But on the good news is it's not the be all end all in terms of determining your sleep health. There's
Mm.
probably a few things those folks might want to do, and like maybe getting checked out for sleep apnea. Especially even maybe taking a little nap earlier in the day so that they're able to fall asleep at a more regular bedtime. Because if they're falling asleep at 7, I'm assuming they're probably not able to get to sleep till a little bit later in the evening after that.
Thank you. That's a great response. Yeah, these are yeah, complex, lots of moving parts, right? That contribute to how well someone sleeps. And I see some other questions are in the chat. So we're going to take note of these and happy to follow up. Because these are some great questions that our team can do some digging on. So
Yeah, all
um,
right. Happy to also dig in there with you.
Yeah, we'll follow up with Dr. Keys. So Dr. Keys, I will let you go so that you can head off to your class. But on behalf of all of us, thank you so much for a fantastic presentation and just a great reminder for us to pay close attention to our sleep and sleep quality.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for having me. Have a great night's sleep tonight, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
And so if everyone wants to stay on the line, we've just got a couple more things to share with folks. And I'll just bring up my screen. Great. And hopefully everyone can see this all right. Um, So that was a fantastic presentation. I hope everyone enjoyed themselves. And I just wanted to highlight a few things for you. So our team supports research recruitment, both provincially, but also nationally and internationally. And today I've got three opportunities to share with you. So, researchers at the University of Waterloo and the University of Alberta are wanting feedback from people living with dementia and care partners on a mobile app called Guard.io. And this was developed to support community safety and help prevent people from going missing. So, participating in this study would involve trying out the app and then providing feedback on what you think about it. So, if this is something that you would be interested in, please reach out to Dr. Antonio Miguel Cruzat. There is his email address, miguelcr@ualberta.ca, or you can give him a call, 780-492-6104. The next opportunity is from folks at the University of Victoria, and they are exploring why persons living with dementia request MAID, but from the perspective from a family caregiver. They're interested in learning more about the factors like unmet care needs or transitions into long-term care that would prompt a family to think about this. So if you'd like to participate, it would be a 1 hour Zoom interview or in person with the research coordinator Ashley, and you can contact her at Berard, Aberard @uvic.ca. And lastly, Professor Jennifer Bombish at UBC's School of Nursing has an exciting opportunity for folks. Her team is studying the impact of climate on older adults' mental health. So, given the more frequent climate-related weather events that we've been experiencing, particularly in BC, Dr. Bombish and her team are looking to understand more about how these weather events impact older adults' mental health. So, participating in the study would mean sharing photos that illustrate how climate change impacts your mental health. There'll also be opportunities to join in a workshop so that you can share with other folks who are experiencing similar things. So if you'd like to reach out, gero@nursing.ubc.ca or give her a call at 604-822-7496. If you're wanting more information about dementia or wondering about programs and services that we offer through the Society, please give our First Link Dementia Helpline a call. Our operators would be happy to support you in English, Punjabi, Hindi, Urdu, Cantonese, and Mandarin. So thank you all so much for joining us today. We really appreciate hearing your feedback on how we could make these Research Connects webinars even better. So before we wrap it up for today, please take a moment to respond to 3 questions that we're going to be launching in the poll. And I believe that Lori's probably popped those in there. So thank you, Lori. Great. And it should be on your screen now. So if you just want to give us your answers, that would be most appreciated. Great. And if you're interested in contributing to our knowledge of dementia, we encourage you to get involved in a research project. You know, engaging in research activities can make a difference in your community now, but also for future generations. So if you'd like to find out more about, you know, the research that opportunities that I shared just now, please visit our webpage under the section I want to participate in research at alzbc.org/research. So in addition to this short survey you completed, we love to hear from you. Any ideas or concerns or questions that you have about today's topic, please send us a message at research@alzheimersbc.org. Our team has access to that and we'll get back to you. So we hope that you'll share You'll join us again on Wednesday, March 4th. Next year, from 2 to 3 p.m. for our next Research Connects webinar, Blood-Based Biomarker Testing in BC. And Dr. Natanya Russick will be presenting on that. She is a UBC Behavioral Neurology and Dementia Fellow and also a clinical instructor with UBC's Division of Geriatric Medicine. Dr. Russick will share the latest updates on Alzheimer's disease biomarker testing, focusing on the who, what, where, when, and why of blood-based biomarker tests for early detection and timely intervention. So you can find additional details about that webinar, including a registration link at alzbc.org/webinars closer to that date. And the date again was March 4th. Please visit our YouTube channel website to watch previous recordings of our Research Connects webinar. We pop those up there a few days after they go live. And I would just like to express our heartfelt appreciation for Dr. Elizabeth Keys for sharing her passion and her expertise on sleep-focused research. So with that, this is the final Research Connects webinar of 2025, and we want to extend our heartfelt appreciation for your ongoing interest and support in dementia-related research. It's a privilege to learn and explore alongside you. And so from all of us, the Alzheimer Society of BC and the Research and Knowledge Mobilization team, we wish you a peaceful and joy-filled holiday season, and we are looking forward to seeing you again in 2026. Thank you so much and take good care, everyone.